so a quick framing before we encounter our sacred text this morning. And the framing is actually from a part of this morning's traditional Torah reading that we don't usually read here in the congregation. As I thought, okay, what's new this year in 5784 to share about this same Torah portion we read every year as Jews get to think of what's new this year? I wanted to bring our attention to the very last part of what is a traditional reading on Rosh Hashanah, day 1. We know the part about Hagar and Sarah and the conflict and the children and all that, and there's a lot always to say about that. But after that, there's an interesting little part that happens in the Torah. And I forgot to write the page number down for it. Let me just tell you, we are, if you look at page 489, actually page 487. Oh, maybe we are doing number 2118. Nope. Yeah, we stop right before we do the beginning of it. Anyway, we'll see. Whatever we do, Evan will let us know. We'll get to that part when we get there. But here's a framing about it. Why is this our Torah reading today? The very ending of this, we talk about Abraham and Avimelech. And they've got this arrangement, and Avimelech says, oh, please deal with me kindly as you have towards others for my offspring and posterity. And Abraham says, yes, I'll do it. We're kind of in that second half of that last paragraph. Abraham says, I'll swear it. But Abraham complained to Avimelech about the water Avimelech's servant stole. What's going on with this? Who knows exactly what's going on with this? But let me tell you what we might do with this. So they have like a good relationship. Hey, will you be my friend? Yeah, I'll be your friend. Yeah, I promise I'll be your friend. But you know, here's this thing that I want to tell you. Some people connected to you were really mean and unkind. There was something that actually marred our relationship in essence. I'll be your friend, but there's something that marred our relationship. And what does Avimelech said? Avimelech says, I didn't know. I didn't know. Who did this? You never told me. You never told me. I have never heard of it until today. So Abraham takes sheep and cattle and he gives them to Avimelech and they make up and they have a breach. They have a sacred covenant coming out of this reconciliation. And then they deepen into that covenant, and that's the source of Beersheba being called Beersheba, if you've ever been there in Israel. So what might we learn from this? Our rabbis teach that letting out those hurts inside, naming them in a relationship is actually an important part of shalom, of real relationship. In fact, it's only in real relationship where we really can have, hopefully, the trust, the container, the context. Will you be my friend? Yes, I swear it. I promise I'll be your friend, even if you tell me something that's difficult. Rabbi Yossi said, and this kind of lifting up something that you think is marring the relationship, is making it difficult in the relationship, the Hebrew word here says hocheach, and the noun form is tochacha. Tochacha. So if you hear in Judaism, tochacha, it's reproof, right? Reproof. Anyway, tochacha it's called, and there's a lot that Judaism says about how to do it effectively. You really, right? Well, that's gonna make us some more challenges in the relationship, perhaps. But tochacha is an integral, important, critical piece of any deep relationship, actually. Rabbi Yossi says, tochacha leads to love. And if you think of a relationship where you've had somebody who loves you, you love them, and there's been some kind of airing of something that's inside, how has that perhaps deepened your relationship? There can be more love when it's done skillfully, when both partners are open to airing things out. Reish Lakish says, tochacha, all peace that doesn't include tochacha is not real shalom and peace. Because if you think about a time when you've really felt like a wholeness and peace in a relationship, if there's something that you're harboring, you can't have full wholeness and peace. But when you're able to, again, skillfully, effectively air it, be heard, and move through that tshuva process, then the shalom that can happen. So this year I just invite you, we often, I think, in our culture say, oh, it's just a small little thing. Oh, it's not really worth bringing up. But if the relationship is really one where I swear it, I'm in a relationship with somebody, and I want there to be deep love and deep wholeness and deep seeing, how can we start to look inside and say, hey, what's going on for me that's getting in that way? And what do I need to do to learn how to skillfully bring forth something? Reach out to us if you want more support for any of that, learning from Judaism or other different support on that. But it starts with naming for yourself and knowing it's okay. In fact, it's critical. It's critical for true love, deep wholeness, that we are able to name for ourselves what's marring the relationship and then move forward with Tochacha. So may we hold those possibilities as we move into this new year. And let us say, Amen.
So I'd like to make the case to you that our roughly 2,000-year-old structure, that's our Rosh Hashanah prayers, particularly the Musaf prayers, is actually a pretty good way of getting in touch with our existential situation as human beings. But first, a story I recently came upon from the Tibetan tradition. Once there was a beggar who was wandering around begging for food and for grain. And at one point, he was able to accumulate enough barley that he had a huge sack of it. Barley's a big thing in Tibetan culture. It's kind of a staple grain. He was very happy. It was the best achievement of his life. He felt more relief, more happiness than he had ever felt before. And so he decided to take a break. He saw a house and decided to sleep underneath the eaves of the house. He tied the big sack of barley up to one of the rafters, and he lay down to sleep. But he couldn't fall asleep because his heart was racing with so much joy and excitement. He started planning his future. The first thought that popped into his mind was he was going to make a business out of that big bag of barley. Soon he would be a wealthy man. It was only a matter of time. His situation was going to change. Soon he'd get married, and then he would have a son. Yeah, a son, and that made him even more excited. He started thinking, what would he name his son? He had a difficult time coming up with an auspicious name for a few minutes, but just then he saw the moon rising, and so he decided to call his son the famous moon. I'm assuming it works much better as a name in Tibetan than it does in English. All this while, a big rat was gnawing on the rope that held the big sack of barley to the rafter. Soon the rope was broken, and the big sack fell on his head and killed him. Nevertheless, in Tibetan, this story is called the parable of the father of the famous moon. I thought it was a funny story, too. You have to have a certain kind of sense of humor, but I do. I have that kind. I heard some other people did here. So that is the first element of our existential situation. We're all like that beggar. We all want certainty. Our minds get away from us planning things out. We think that having some kind of security is something we can plan for and maintain, and that it'll make us happy. Everything will be all right. We try to shore things up, to hedge different possibilities. And of course, there's some truth to this. We need to plan for retirement, for the future, Bank accounts are a good thing. Studies have shown it's important not to sleep directly under a sack of barley, at least a big one. But we really don't have certainty. And try as we might, we're never going to get certainty. Probably a number of us know the Yiddish saying, der Mensch tracht und Gott lacht, right? The human being thinks and God laughs. And so our Rosh Hashanah prayers directly address this situation. Who by fire? Who by water? Right? We all come together and we collectively admit we just don't know. We don't know who is going to be here next year. We don't even know who's going to be here at the close of Yom Kippur. We're not in control. We acknowledge our vulnerability. We're not calling the shots. Of course, COVID taught us a lot about this. It's perhaps one of the underappreciated gifts of the pandemic that's worth recalling. So we don't have control. We live in this place of deep uncertainty. But our tradition has given us structures through this day that can help, that are empowering, that can speak to our situation. And they're basically these elements of the Rosh Hashanah Musaf that we'll come to in a little while. And those that I want to lift up are the idea of today as a Yom Hadin, conventionally translated as the Day of Judgment. I'll say more about that. And other of the special components of Musaf, of Malchuyot, Zichronot, and Shofarot, which I won't define now, I'll say more about soon. So let's begin with the Unatana Tokef prayer that I invoked a few minutes ago, with the who by fire, who by water line. So one of my favorite lines of that comes in the middle of page 347. We say, addressing God, you alone can remember what we have forgotten. This will, actually, Cantor Caitlin will be saying this on our behalf. It is you who shall open the book of remembrance, but its contents shall speak for themselves. For it bears the imprint of us all, which our deeds and our lives have inscribed. And the last line there has some Hebrew that I particularly love. It says, V'chotam yad kol adam bo. Every human being signs the book, this book of life, with their signature, their chotam yad, literally the seal of their hand. So how have we each signed the book? The tradition seems to ask us. The next line right after this describes the heavenly court, and when the great shofar is sounded, a small, quiet voice, a kol damama daka, can be heard, and the heavenly beings, the angels, are thrown into fright and seized by a terrible dread, and they declare, Hine, Yom Hadin, behold, the day of judgment has arrived. And this is one of those archetypal images, the mythic scenes of drama that our tradition evokes for us at this season. Din does indeed mean judgment, but it is also self-scrutiny. It's also accountability. We act as though this is the day and this is the season that we are called to account. Each of us hears the existential question asked by God to Adam in the garden. God says, Ayeka, where are you? Of course, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Ladi says God was not asking just a simple locational question. God knew where Adam was in the garden. God was asking at the deepest level, where are you at, Adam? And that is part of the sense of awe that even as moderns, even as Reconstructionists, we can still enter into collectively that awe that comes from being called into account on this day by the Holy One. And then Unatana Tokef goes on to give us an answer, one answer to working with the uncertainty of our lives. It says, Teshuvah, tefillah, and tzedakah make easier what God may decree. So tefillah of heartfelt prayer, tzedakah, giving generously to those in need, living from a place of generosity, and teshuvah, looking deeply into our lives. So that is what we can mean by Yom Hadin, by this day of deep scrutiny, of self-scrutiny. And we then wake up. We wake up and we notice, where are we falling asleep in our lives? And that's the shofar that is there, among other things, to wake us up. Some of us have been really working hard to try to do this work of waking up, of scrutiny, from the beginning of the month of Elul. But it's really hard to sustain that kind of awareness and scrutiny and looking inward continually. So we're given this bounded period of time to focus, particularly through Yom Kippur, to really notice, where are we acting unconsciously, reactively, hurtfully? Where are we just being driven by impulse in ways that don't serve us, that are unskillful? Where are we not taking responsibility in our lives? Interestingly, this theme of din is not mentioned that much in our Rosh Hashanah liturgy, beyond the prominent place I just spoke about in Unatana Tokef. Much more prominent in our prayers, we encountered it quite a number of times already in the morning Amidah, is the idea of divine sovereignty, or God's Malchut. And soon we'll come to the Musaf section called Malchuyot, sovereignties, literally. One of the classical explanations of the shofar is it's to accompany a coronation, enthroning God as the ruler. So what can this mean for us who do not live with a society of kings and queens, and one that is instead still committed to democratic ideals? At least a number of us are. May there be more every day. So there's actually quite a lot I've come to appreciate about the invocation of God's Malchut. And I want to develop one idea that I think is a powerful reconstructing of this idea of God's Malchut that comes from Rabbi Zalman Schachter Shalomi, a very important influence on me and many others, but known better as Reb Zalman. Reb Zalman in general was very concerned with the idea of paradigm shift, that we now live in a different paradigm than our ancestors did. And so core elements of Judaism, this is a similar idea to Reconstructionism, need to be reformatted and reimagined for the paradigm in which we now live. So this king, the Melech metaphor, comes from the very long stretch of time, of course, when hierarchy ruled our understanding of the world. We had the idea of the great chain of being, and the king or the queen was the most exalted of all humans, and beyond them were the angels, until the chain reached up to the very throne of God himself, the Melech HaOlam, the king of the universe. Of course, now we don't crown rulers, we vote for them. Kingdoms and feudal hierarchies have given way to states and corporations, and these two are hierarchical, but the hierarchies are fluid. Science is interested in systemic models. Business management theories advise allowing productivity and creativity to emerge organically from within organizations. Slowly but surely, Reb Zalman describes, we are replacing the great hierarchical chain of being as our core model for understanding our world with a great chain of life, a tzror hachayim, a chain that enfolds everything from the microorganisms that keep our planet alive to the planetary intelligence of which they are a part. This is Reb Zalman's Jewish spiritual adaptation of the Gaia, what's known as the Gaia hypothesis, a scientific theory that proposes that all organisms and their inorganic surroundings on Earth are closely integrated to form a single and self-regulating complex system to maintain the conditions for life on this planet. So Reb Zalman continues, what happens if we reimagine Melech HaOlam, king of the world or the universe, instead as the governing organismic wisdom of HaOlam, of the planet Earth? All of a sudden, then, we see phrases like God is kind or God is merciful in a new light. Instead of seeing God as an all-powerful patriarch in the sky, we can affirm that, yes, the universe is kind in the sense of being hospitable to life. Yes, the universe is compassionate in the sense that Earth heals her children. In our new understanding, such phrases become metaphors for the essential qualities of the planetary miracle we call life. If we took a traditional, what you could call a triumphalist understanding of the many prayers we have in our machzor that say, God, rule over the world, it would be something like, let all the peoples of the earth acknowledge God in the way that we do as Jews. But now, aided by Reb Zalman's ideas, we can understand these prayers to say something like, you can imagine speaking to God and saying, God, help us to really know our organismic nature, that we are a cell in the Jewish organ of the divine body. This is an amazing metaphor, a cell in the Jewish organ of the divine body. So help us to know that we are really an integral part of the whole. And so then this understanding opens up in a new way, this key line from our liturgy, Zochrenu l'chaim, remember us for life. Melech hafetz b'chaim, you could then translate as the governing organismic wisdom of our planet and beyond, who desires life, to sustain life. We're not asking an all-powerful king to not condemn us to death. Instead, we are saying to God, we want to collaborate with you to serve and support the flourishing of life. We don't want to act like a rogue cell, a cancer cell in the greater body. So this sense of being integral is so important. And in Malchuyot, then, we're not just surrendering to God's vastness, that's one of the ways we've talked about it before, and that's important, but in this new kind of gloss on this, we're recognizing our cell-like nature in this Jewish organ of the divine body. And from that recognition, from that knowing, we seek to serve the whole. We're not just, it gives us instructions. It's an empowerment of sorts to do this work, to install the software of this idea of being integral to the whole, to take it forward today and into the year, into all of the things that we do. And this kind of integral understanding and awareness is one of the ways that we can say that the divine will is expressing itself now, right? It's different than perhaps our ancestors knew, but it's part of the further evolution. And this contains within it its own ideas of tshuva, of recalibrating, of changing our course. We can notice, when am I acting in my life from a place of separation? When am I acting like a rogue cell in the whole system? When am I acting and praying from a place of knowing in my own and others' integralness to the whole? So we come now to the last component of our existential exploration here, the Zichronot section of Musaf, which means literally remembrances, memory. If you'd like, you can open your Machzorim to page 635, and I'll lift up some of the beautiful poetry from the early rabbis on that page. You remember all that you have made within your world. Consider every creature fashioned since creation. Before you, every secret is uncovered, the whole multitude of mysteries since the world began. Nothing is forgotten in the presence of your throne of glory, and nothing is hidden from before your eyes. You remember each completed act, each created being. None escapes your gaze. Skipping just a little bit. All of your many works, your mass of living creatures, the vast infinity of beings, each has its place within your memory and thought. What's clear to me is that the early rabbis are guiding us to invoke something very, very deep here. And I think that is that we are being seen in this evocation of the Zichronot, that we are being seen by the divine compassionate gaze. That our individuality, our humanness, is somehow being seen, noticed within an impossibly vast conscious awareness, to call it the divine mind. It's something to sit with, to ponder, to feel into. I think that in the Indian tradition or the Buddhist tradition, they would call it consciousness itself we are arising in. So here the rabbis are doing it in a little bit more anthropomorphic language, but our tradition is inviting us to see ourselves, to imagine ourselves as being noticed, seen, held by the divine gaze, registering somehow in the vastness of divine memory. And in offering this, I'm intentionally pushing back a little bit of what I see as some of the limited nature of classical Reconstructionist theology, which I think can water down and make excessively humanist the rabbi's traditional language. So you'll find like a comment on one of the pages that says, when we pray for God to remember, we are reciting a list of things that we then collectively remember, which is true. But really, this prayer, this part of our service for just today and tomorrow, goes way deeper than that. So that really tapping into this vast, unknowable, intelligent context that we each exist in our individuality, which is seeing us, which we are not separate from, and which we return to. And this can help us at a deep level with that feeling of being integral to the whole. Another way of languaging this is to say that the power of Zichronot is the opportunity to be transparent before God, to not be opaque, to allow ourselves kind of make that internal move of allowing our egoic selves, our hardened thought images of ourselves to sort of recede and to become transparent. And of course, they say transparency is the key to accountability. So these are the gifts, these are the opportunities, the tools our tradition offers, these and more, but these are the ones I'm lifting up to deal with our difficult human situation, embracing our reality of uncertainty, allowing ourselves to take in the power of this day as a day of deep scrutiny, yet one that at the same time is held within the divine compassionate gaze and memory. And to see ourselves as integral to the whole, that the sovereign that we seek to serve is the governing organismic wisdom of Ha'olam, of our planet and beyond. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.